Don here in Florida, and today we're going to do the video that I said I'd never do, and that's threading. Why? Because everybody does a threading video. But what I've come to realize is this. When it comes to threading videos, there's basically three types of machinists. There's the Poindexters, the guys that use the math, everything has to be correct and right. These guys can make you nervous because you always think you're going to ruin something. The big boys, you know, the A-bombs, they got the big machines and they just whoop it off like, you know, it's nothing. And little secret here, actually the bigger the machine, the easier it is to thread. If you're working on one of these smaller machines, it's a whole nother ball game. Believe me, I've worked on the bigger machines, much easier. My Monarch right here, for example, that just, it's like eating cake. It's too easy. But on these smaller machines, you know, you gotta really focus on what you're doing. And they make up the majority of the guys that are doing YouTube videos. Unfortunately, I'm in neither one of those classes. I'm more one of the cool guys. How do I know I'm one of the cool guys? Because I have sunglasses. Prescription sunglasses at that. All fooling around the side. Threading doesn't have to be as hard as you think it might be. And I think the two biggest fears that people have are, one, ruining the thread, which, let me set that fear aside. As long as you hit the same number every time, your thread's going to turn out right. Okay, it's like a computer. Garbage in, garbage out. Good info in, good thread out. Okay, so let the machine do its job and you can just kind of do away with that fear. The second issue is crashing. A lot of people worry about crashing. So let's see if we can show you a couple of ways to maybe try to get by these fears and get you threading like a pro, because it really doesn't have to be that agonizing. So let's try it. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up for an easy thread. And a 12 is fairly easy. So we're gonna go 12, and that's gonna be A, and on this mark here, let's just bring that over and up. So we're in line with 12, and then A is over here and up. All right, and before we get going here, I'm gonna go off camera and put some lube into this thing. Okay, so looking at the book here, let's just keep life simple. It says for any even numbered thread, we all know what even numbered is, you can engage on any point on your dial. Okay, when engaging on odd numbered threads, then you want to be engaging either on the 1 or 2. Something to keep in mind here is the 1 and 2 are always safe, no matter if you're odd or even. If you have a half increment, like a 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, don't even worry about that. I don't ever remember doing one of these threads, but you get back to the book here and it says just use the same mark each time. So it's really not that difficult. If you're ever in doubt, just always hit the 1 or 2. I usually find that the machine comes around fast enough that I just constantly hit the 1, and it makes it easy when I go from machine to machine. I'll just always hit the 1. So unless you're doing some type of production work where absolute speed is the needed thing, then that's probably the way to go, unless you want to just go by a CNC. So on this machine, you actually have to engage the threading dial. So we'll drop it in place and make sure it's in there, and lock it, see how it wants to come out. There we go. So just so we can see this better, let's mark the 1 and the 2 in red, and our marker point in red, and we'll mark the offsides in blue. So, and now we can go ahead and see what this does for us. All right, you want to pick your poison on what you're going to use for a cutting tool. And this one here, I'm never set up for, so we're not going to use that. This is my favorite, LTMR. I really like this tool a lot. It gets in tight spots, I think, a lot better than some of the newer tools. But we're going to just go ahead and use this high-speed steel today, and this one's ground for both positive rake and negative rake. We're going to go with the positive. And you want to make sure your tool is set to the right height. In this case, I'm using a 1/2 ground precision pin, and if I can just go under the edge of the pin with it upside down, I know my tool height is correct. You want to make sure that the cutting tool is aligned square with the work you're doing. Today we're just going to do old school right hand threading off the compound, and if we can get in there, we're set at 29.5 to 30 degrees on the compound. So and always remember, when we're turning, we always want to have a 0 point where we scratch the surface. Now these dials are really crappy, and I put DROs on my machine, so I'll be actually going off the DRO for the 0 point, and then we'll be adding in on the compound right here every time we make a pass. So let's show you how to get on that. Okay, like I said, I think the biggest fears that people have are, one, crashing, and you can ease that fear of crashing by, one, starting with a smaller chuck, because psychologically a smaller chuck you fear less than a larger chuck. And two, start off with some length, and we're going to use PVC here because PVC is cheap, you can practice on it, and you don't have fear of messing it up really like you do a nice piece of metal that you're working on. So we have a nice amount of length out here on this PVC. We have room to move in. And let's just see what this does. Just get some Dicom on there so we can see this better. Okay, so we want to come up. We want to make sure that we're just barely touching. And that'll be our 0 point. This is where people start getting a little nervous, knowing exactly how much to come in. Don't worry about it. Just give it a little turn like that. Just a couple thousand. See what happens. I mean, we're just practicing, right? So we'll wait till she comes around onto the 1. And look at that, we're threading. And back out. And notice I didn't have to give myself any run out on this. No run out whatsoever. That's the beauty of PVC. You don't really have to worry about those things. And I'm on a controlled speed knob here, so I can slow this down just a bit. And we're going to bring it in. I'm not even looking. I just bring it in maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Who knows? And here we go. Another pass. And voila. And back to 0. And we're going to bring in another thousands or so here and see what happens. Whoop, I missed it. Luckily I had a little bit of space there, right? Let's do it again. And there we go. Bring it out away from the 0. Bring it back. I'm going to bring it back into my 0. And I'm looking at the DRO here. I can't really see those dials anymore. And then we're just going to bring it in a little bit. I'm not even looking at that. I'm just doing it by feel. Let's bring it up around till we hit the number 1 again. And 1. And out, back. And then back to our 0. And I'll bring it in a couple more thousands. Waiting for that 1. Actually, let's do the 2 this time. Let's see what happens when the 2 comes up. Okay, we're going to bring it in a couple thousandths, and we're going to wait for the 1 to come around, and we hit it on the 1. and there's our next thread. And out. Bring it back out, away on the cross slide, and then I'll zero it back on the cross slide. All right, let's try it on the one again. And we're running right down through that thread and out. And I'm bringing it back to zero and up and back down to the zero. On my cross slide, and then we're going to bring it in just a couple thousandths. I'm not even looking at the dial, I just do it by feel. And then when we bring it around to the, let's bring it around to the 2 this time. And whoop, I missed. Yep. But notice I just caught the end of the thread, so that's no big deal. And let's try it again. Bring it around to the 2 and boom-bah, there we go. Nice thread all the way through. And out, and bring it back. And then back up to the 0. There we go, right down to 0. And then we're going to bring it in a couple more thousandths, and we'll do it on the 1 this time. And there we go. And out, back out, and up. All right, let's take a look at what we got so far. Okay, it looks like we're doing a nice thread here. Now my thread pitch gauge, you're not supposed to do it this way, but my thread pitch gauge I can also use to kind of gauge my depth to the threads to make sure they're getting close. And we've got some really seriously decent threads here. So let's do something else. Let's change our gearbox down to a 13. And we can do that by moving over 1. We're going to move it up into 13. And let's see what happens when we thread at 13 on a 12. Oh no! We just seriously ruined those threads. But you know what? It just don't matter, because this was practice. Okay, and that's why we do practice. What we did do through all of that, though, is we proved that we can run a perfectly good thread just as long as we're hitting any one of those indicators on the thread dial. Okay, so we've practiced on that PVC a little bit. Now we're ready to do some real threading. Now, one of the things that you take into consideration when you're going to thread something that you're actually going to use is your major diameter. You always want to start with your major diameter. But we're just practicing, so we don't really care about that. You can use any size stock you want just to practice on. As a matter of fact, let's say I took a piece of this 5/8 stock here and I was going to make a 5/8 bolt. I would already be at my major diameter. Let's say I had to take it down to 1/2 inch though before I started threading. Well, guess what? I have all that right there that I can practice with before I go down to my 1/2 inch. I can come in here and thread that over a couple times just to get some practice, make sure it's going to roll. So normally I would practice on that. Now, after we just did the little run with the PVC, we had this in high gear, and that threading tool was rolling right along pretty good. Well, if that makes you nervous, you can, and I would, drop this into back gear. Okay, when you're in back gear, you have more power to cut with, and the threading goes a lot slower. Now, we know that the threads cut faster tend to look nicer, but you know what? Let's not worry about nice right now. Let's worry about threading. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here and we're going to run approximately a 1-inch thread down through there. So what we're going to do before we get started is we're going to put a little chamfer on this end here. Okay. And we're going to leave some space for some run out. Let's say we're going to put 1 inch of thread. Well, guess what? We're already nervous that that's going to be rolling too far. So let's try this. let's back it out and move this out. Give ourselves approximately twice the space we actually need for this. And then we'll bring a live center up into it like this. So, and this will stabilize everything. And we said we need some run out. Well, let's give ourselves some run out, okay? So let's say we need 1 inch. Let's give ourselves more than 1 inch. Okay, this gives us room to catch threads that we may not get the dial on correctly. And we can just cut off at the end if we have to. So how much run out do we need? Well, that's up to you. How deep do you need it? Well, you want it deeper than the thread that's going to come out. And maybe we should round that out just a little bit. So let's put a tool in there to round it. A little oil might be nice. We're new, we're nervous. Let's go ahead and put this into back gear so we can slow it right down. So, okay, we're in back gear, so it should move nice and slow for us. A little bit of oil. All right, and I want to come back far enough that I can catch this dial if I miss my mark. So I'm going to put some added light onto that and get that into gear. Let's see what she'll do. Okay, so we want to 0 on here. Okay. And we'll go ahead and 0 out on the GRO. And we'll turn that one off. And we're going to run it on the 1 to start. So let's let her get up around here to the 1. And it's going nice and slow now. So there we go. And we're making a very light scratch pass on there. And this gives us plenty of room to run out. Bring it back up. And then bring it back to 0. And you've seen all the big boys check their threads here, and we're on a 12 pitch, just like we set it originally. Okay, turn it back on, and we're going to go ahead and bring it in a couple thousandths. I'm just doing it by feel, and we're going to bring up the, we know the 2 works, I just missed the 2. We're going to bring it up and hit the 1. And that gives me plenty of time to pull out and come back. A little bit different angle here. Okay, so let's see if we can hit that on the 1. Let's see if we can hit that on the 2. Oh, we missed it. Let's see what happens when we hit 1. Let's see what happens when we hit 2. Very good. 1. Now let's see what happens when we hit any number. Very good, very good. And if we miss, oh no! All right, so we're gonna come in a couple more thousandths. And I just missed the 1, so let's go around to the 2 and see what happens. And there we have a nice cut. It's in the same groove. And plenty of time. Pop it out, move it back, and bring it in. And you see, at this speed and at this distance from the chuck, I don't worry about crashing. Okay, I've given myself extra on this end that I can cut off later in case I do mash those threads. If I miss that and haven't paid attention, I can always cut that back. I only need that much thread, but I've allowed myself extra, which we'll take off at the end. And we'll come around and let's do it on the 2 this time. Oh, gotta bring it in a couple thousandths. 2. And it just rolls along, making this nice little thread. Pop it out, bring it back, up, back into our 0 on the cross slide. A couple more thousandths. Okay, add a little bit of oil here. And wait for it to come around. It says I can do it on any mark, right? We're on 12. Let's do it on another mark. Oh, see, I missed it. Back it up. And there we go. On any mark. And see, it's still following the same pattern. And back it out. Bring it up. Back down to 0. Wow, I was in 2000s that time. A couple more thousandths. And let's do it on the 2 this time. Oh, I missed it, but I gave myself some space. Let's do it on the 1 this time. There we go. Always good to give yourself a little bit of space. There we go. Back it out. Up. In. A couple more thousandths. Just take your time. Take it slow. And let's do it on any mark this time. There we go. Back it out. Up. In. All right. And take a couple more thousandths. And this time we'll hit any mark. All right, let's take a look at our progress. And as you can see, we're making a nice thread in there. A couple more passes, we're gonna have a nice 12 TPI on a 5/8 shaft. Unfortunately, I don't have a 5/8 nut to put on there, 12 TPI, so there's no way to really test it. But this is just practice. So let's do it one more time. All right, let's 0 it. And I'm zeroing on the DRO. My cross slide. And bringing in a couple more thousandths. And we're gonna hit it on the number 1. And that time we got a perfect 12 TPI thread. So, and that's per the threading gauge. An actual nut you'd want to use, and you'd want to sneak up on that if you were really doing this for a thread. But basically it boils down to this. When you're learning to do this, give yourself some space, give yourself some extra. I actually purposely messed up those first 2 threads there, and they didn't come out too bad at the end because I had to cut deeper, so it cleaned up the threads that I mashed. But I've got more thread here than technically I would need because I gave myself more space. I gave myself space to mess up on the end of that thread. So try to keep that in mind. The small chuck, like I said, that's psychological. Once you get past all this, you know, any chuck or collet that you want to use is going to be just fine. But I would, if you've got more than one chuck, I would definitely start with the smallest chuck you've got. Practice on some PVC, give yourself the space, and it just all falls into place. I think a lot of it's just getting by your dial and hitting it right. Once you practiced hitting that in and out properly, it's like old hat. As far as hitting the numbers that you need for the threads, you know, odd, 1, 2, even, all four, at least on this machine. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're ever in doubt, number one always. Okay, so the Dons says that's it for today. Easy threading, the cool guy way. Once you get past being cool, eventually you might turn into a Poindexter or a big boy. That's on you. So I hope you get something out of this. And as always, from Florida, Don out.